Welcome to Stress and Heal. Take a deep breath and let the noise fade away. It's time for a quiet story, just for you. Hey guys, tonight we're setting off on a starlit camel trail through golden dunes, tracing the footsteps of the richest man who ever lived, but not in the way you might expect. The year is 1280 something. The empire is Mali, vast and humming with trade. The boy in question? You. And yes, your palace smells like cardamom and camel sweat. You're going to grow up to command libraries, reshape economies, and gift away literal tons of gold. Just a heads up, you probably won't survive this in your Venmo balance. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are a child of royal blood, one of the many sons born into the court of the Keita dynasty. The Mali Empire at this time is not just some hazy ancient territory. It's a massive, sun-soaked hub stretching from the Atlantic coast deep into the desert, studded with cities like Niani, Gao, and the fabled Timbuktu. You're surrounded by desert traders with foreign spices, musicians plucking stringed instruments made from gourds, and scholars debating astronomy over honey-sweet tea. Your early days are spent learning to ride a camel before you can even recite poetry, which, in Mali, is saying something. Poets are basically the Wi-Fi routers of history here. They're called griots, and they don't just sing songs, they carry memory. You hear them chant the names of kings before you, their victories, their mistakes, their absurd number of cousins. Every day in the palace is a slow swirl of incense and instruction. You're taught to read Arabic, to recite the Quran, to solve math problems using pebbles on woven mats. You learn how to judge land by the scent of its soil, how to speak in proverbs rather than orders, and how to sit still while wearing truly uncomfortable embroidered robes. Outside your court, the real Mali Empire pulses with movement. Picture this: caravans of camels carrying salt slabs from the mines of Tagaza, so big they clank like dinner plates. Merchants trade gold dust in tiny leather pouches, weighing it against red feathers or porcelain beads. And somewhere out there, far beyond your world, a European cartographer is still wondering if Africa is mostly just jungle and lions. Spoiler, it's not. But back to you. Even as a child, you can feel the expectation humming in the air like a drumbeat. You're not the oldest. You're not the loudest. But you are watchful. While your cousins argue over who gets the biggest slice of date cake, you're memorizing the names of the generals, the layout of the gardens, the fact that one eunuch always sneaks mangoes after dark. Historians still argue whether your early years were truly marked by peace or just a quiet before a sandstorm of change. But one thing's clear: you're being prepared. Your teachers test you not with swords, but with riddles. One famously tosses you this: what breaks without being touched and speaks without a mouth? You blink, puzzled. Later, you'll understand. It's trust, and ruling Mali will demand heaps of it. Then, one day, you're called to a meeting beneath the tall acacia trees just outside the palace walls. It's not a grand coronation, no parades, just a small circle of elders, a whisper that the reigning Mansa king has vanished on some mysterious voyage west, sailing off into the Atlantic with a fleet of ships and a dream of finding the edge of the world. No one knows if he'll return. And suddenly, the drumbeat shifts. People start looking at you differently. You're not the first in line, but you're convenient, smart, cautious, which is basically the ancient world's version of being CEO material. Within weeks, you're crowned Mansa Musa, King Musa of Mali. The title is heavy, and so are the gold bracelets they slap on your wrists. And here's the funny part: even as you sit on the throne, even as people bow and the griots start adding your name to songs, you're already planning. Not wars, not feasts, a journey. One of faith, yes, to Mecca, the holy city, but also of something quieter. A journey to prove to yourself and the world that Mali isn't just rich in gold, it's rich in soul, in knowledge, in rhythm and elegance. But for now, you stay still. You watch, you gather knowledge like sand in your sandals, and you begin. You've stepped into power, But you don't roar, you glide. In a world where some kings are busy hammering their names into stone, you prefer to write yours in silence, through policies, patronage, and prayer. Your court in Niani swells with curious visitors, salt traders from the Sahara, mystics from Egypt, even scholars from distant Andalusia, their robes stiff with the dust of travel and just a pinch of intellectual superiority. They come for the gold, of course. Mali practically glows with the stuff. But they stay for the promise of something else: order, elegance, and the quiet weight of a ruler who listens more than he speaks. Each morning, you rise early, not because kings have to, but because you want to. You're obsessed with detail. How many camels arrived yesterday from Gao? How much salt was traded in Timbuktu? Has the Imam finished translating that Persian manuscript yet? You walk the corridors barefoot. Gold doesn't impress you anymore. It's just yellow. You prefer the sound of scribes murmuring over parchment, the soft whoosh of wind slipping through carved wooden shutters. Every day, you meet with your advisors beneath a canopy of woven reeds. The debates flow like river water, sometimes calm, sometimes flooding over into sharp tones and raised eyebrows. You encourage it. You like being challenged. It's how you sharpen the blade of your judgment. You begin to reshape Mali in subtle ways. You strengthen the gold trade, yes, but you also do something that shocks your generals. You pour wealth into mosques and schools instead of weapons. You turn Timbuktu into more than a trading stop. It becomes a magnetic force of knowledge. You commission architects from Cairo to build mosques with pointed arches and sun-baked bricks. You invite scholars to copy rare books by hand, by candlelight, on paper so thin it sighs when turned. And you pay everyone. Very well. That's your secret weapon: generosity. You reward loyalty, not with fear, but with favor. The guards adore you. The merchants trust you. The griots? They're writing epics before you've even finished your coffee. There's one curious side effect of all this gold, though. Your people start using gold dust as currency. Yes, actual dust, measured with spoons carved from ivory or cowbone. The economy sparkles, but it's tricky. You sneeze too close to your purse and suddenly you're tipping a village. Still, it works, and the empire grows. From the copper fields of Takeda to the forests near the coast, your reach expands like the shadow of a baobab tree at sunset. Tribes swear fealty not just out of obligation, but admiration. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. Historians still argue whether you crushed rebellions quietly or simply bought them off with strategic marriages and camel loads of gifts. Either way, you keep things smooth, like a river stone polished by time. One fringe detail that survives in old stories? You kept a personal advisor who was said to talk to birds. Literal birds. He'd sit beneath mango trees, whispering secrets to hawks, and sometimes you swore they whispered back. Whether true or not, you never corrected anyone. In Mali, a little mystery keeps people respectful. And while your empire thrives, one dream begins to press against your heart like the desert sun against your skin. The Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Not just because you're a devout Muslim, though you are, but because you understand something deeper. This is your stage. Your quiet Mali, hidden deep in the West, deserves to be seen. You want the world to know it exists, and not just through the gossip of traders. So you begin planning. Slowly, meticulously, with that same cautious intensity you had as a boy watching mango thieves. You'll go not just as a pilgrim, but as a vision, an ambassador of wealth and grace. A walking golden whisper of a kingdom too majestic to ignore. And here's where things get, well, silly. Because you don't just pack a camel or two. You start assembling what can only be described as an ancient VIP megatour. 60,000 people. Yes, 60,000. You bring soldiers, servants, scholars, griots, and even cooks. You're not trusting Cairo street food, no offense. You pack silk tents, gold-threaded cushions, incense burners shaped like birds, and robes so heavy with embroidery you could bench press them for sport. And the gold? You bring so much gold that your advisors genuinely start to worry about weight distribution. Some of it is carried by camels, some by horses, some sewn discreetly into cloaks, belts, and even the soles of shoes. You also bring your mother's favorite mirror, because even a king needs some sentimental ballast. Your people don't quite understand. Why would the most powerful man in this part of the world leave it all behind? For months? Through scorching deserts? With entire caravans of portable wealth? But you understand, this is not about escape. This is about arrival. You want the world to know that Mali breathes, that it builds, that it dreams, that it does not cower in the dark corners of maps. And so, on a warm morning, with birds screeching somewhere above the palm trees, you mount your horse, raise your right hand, and give the signal. The sand begins to shift, and Mali begins to move. You're not marching eastward, you're gliding. At the head of the caravan, your horse steps so lightly you'd think even the desert respects your pace. Behind you, the golden tide stretches for miles. Camels sway like ships at sea, their backs burdened with satchels that glitter in the sunlight. Silk tents billow on carts. Even your food cooks travel with spice boxes clinking like wind chimes. The air smells like cardamom and ambition. Your pilgrimage is not just a spiritual journey, it's a theatrical production, and you're the calm-eyed lead. And oh, do the crowds turn out to watch? In village after village, people blink at the procession as if watching a river made of sunlight flow past. The children call you the king who brought his own kingdom with him. You stop often, not out of necessity, but out of kindness. You distribute gold to the poor with the practiced ease of a man tossing pebbles into a pond. You donate to every mosque you pass. You pay debts, fund schools, and leave cities visibly richer than when you arrived. And yet, curiously, it's not just the generosity that makes people remember you. It's the rhythm. Every stop has a pattern. Arrival with music, quiet prayers, the unpacking of the royal tent, so large it takes 2 hours to stake down. Your griots perform by firelight. Scholars lecture under the stars. And you? You sit cross-legged, listening, a lamp beside you casting soft light on the folds of your robe. People begin to whisper legends while you're still in their town. He has a library inside his camel. He once gave a blacksmith a nugget the size of a loaf of bread. He turned a dry well into a fountain just by smiling at it. None of it's true, but none of it feels false either. Somewhere around Walada, the caravan hits its first true test. The Sahara isn't kind, even to kings. Sandstorms roll like angry fog, camels panic, tents collapse. One of your advisors gets lost in the swirl for half a day and returns swearing he saw a ghost playing a lute made of bones. You don't panic. You pause, regroup, and rest until the winds pass. You spend the downtime tending to blisters on your servant's feet. One child in the caravan will later tell his grandchildren, "The richest man alive once wrapped my toe in cloth." As you cross into Egypt, the vibe shifts. You've entered a land used to pomp, pharaohs, pyramids, golden sarcophagi. But still, nothing prepares Cairo for you. The streets grind to a halt, merchants gape, officials sprint to alert the Sultan. And all across the city, people drop whatever they're doing just to see you walk by. You meet the Mamluk Sultan's court with quiet confidence. You bow just enough to be polite, but not enough to suggest subservience. After all, you didn't come for validation. You came to make a statement. And what a statement it is. You distribute so much gold in Cairo, gifts, donations, generous tips to water bearers and street poets, that the local economy begins to wobble. Historians still argue whether you caused a decade-long inflation. Some say Cairo's gold value halved after your visit. Others think that's an exaggeration. You don't seem to care. You just chuckle when told your generosity may have slightly imploded a currency system. But not all your moments in Cairo are dazzling. One night, you wander alone to the mosque, slipping away from your tent with only a single guard. You kneel beside strangers in prayer, blending into the murmured recitations. It's here, in the flickering torchlight and the scent of worn carpets, that you feel the true purpose of your journey swell in your chest. Not display, not spectacle, devotion. You stay for hours, and when you finally rise and return to your camp, the guard, who waited silently at the gate the entire time, asks why you didn't reveal who you were. You shrug. "What's the point of gold?" you say, "if the heart remains heavy?" He never repeats that quote to anyone, but he thinks of it often. Leaving Cairo, you push onward to Mecca. The final stretch is less dramatic, more spiritual. The desert narrows. The conversation's quiet. Your people grow tired, but they also grow still inside. Something changes in them, and in you. And finally, you see it. Mecca. The city glows under a pale sky, its stone walls framed by craggy hills. You step off your horse and walk the last mile barefoot, the sand warm beneath your feet. You circle the Kaaba with thousands of other pilgrims, shoulder to shoulder, voice to voice. No one knows who you are in the crowd. And for once, that feels right. You are not Mansa Musa, Emperor of Mali. You are simply a man seeking grace. The road home always feels different. You begin your return journey not with fanfare, but with a slower, quieter rhythm. The laughter of your caravan still drifts into the night, and the drums still pulse like a distant heartbeat. But something has shifted. There's a softness now, like the desert itself has exhaled. Your pilgrimage to Mecca has humbled you in a way no battlefield ever could. But humility doesn't mean invisibility. Word of your pilgrimage spreads faster than your camels can trot. By the time you pass through Cairo again, your reputation has ballooned into myth. You're no longer a visitor, you're a legend in motion. This time, the Sultan insists on hosting you. His courtiers fidget, unsure whether to treat you as a peer or a miracle. You've dropped so much gold into their economy that local artisans have begun making souvenirs of your likeness. Little brass figurines of you riding a camel. Children chant songs about the king from the west who feeds beggars more than princes. You remain gracious, if slightly bemused. You accept tea, exchange gifts, and leave Cairo with even more scholars, architects, and books than you arrived with. A few Egyptian poets decide to follow your caravan all the way back to Mali. The man writes better than my uncle, one of your griots snorts, but let him try surviving a sandstorm. And so, the long return begins. Through heat and wind, across shifting dunes and stubborn skies, you move westward. At night, you lie in your tent, propped up by cushions, listening to the camel bells jingle like distant lullabies. You read verses by lamplight. You dream of Timbuktu, not just the city, but what it could become. And here's where your journey changes from story to strategy. Because you're not returning to the Mali Empire the way you left it. You're returning with plans. Architectural sketches from Cairo, tucked into scrolls and wrapped in silk. Maps of trade routes that wind through the Mediterranean like threads through cloth. Ideas, dangerous, dazzling ideas, on how Mali could become not just wealthy, but wise. You dream of building a university where students can debate the stars. You imagine libraries so vast they need their own guards. You see Timbuktu becoming the pulse of knowledge in West Africa. And you don't just dream it, you fund it. You arrive home to parades and cheers. Drummers line the city walls. Women ululate. Children toss flower petals, or at least dry leaves pretending to be flower petals. And when your advisors ask what you want to do first, you point to an empty patch of land and say, let's build something that will outlive us all. And so Sankore rises. A mosque? Yes, but more than that, a school, a center of learning. You bring in architects from Andalusia and scholars from Egypt. You fund translation projects, collect rare manuscripts, and handpick promising local boys to study mathematics, theology, astronomy, law. You even commission books just to give them something to read. Build minds, you say, not just walls. The griots begin to sing a new kind of praise, not just of your generosity, but of your foresight. You're no longer just the king with the golden pilgrimage. You're the king who planted wisdom like acacia trees and let the desert bloom around them. But of course, not everything goes perfectly. Historians still debate whether your post-pilgrimage spending triggered instability. Some argue that the massive influx of gold disrupted West African trade. Others believe rival kingdoms saw your generosity as weakness. A few whisper that your sons and nephews, spoiled by your wealth, began squabbling before you'd even grown old. You don't ignore these signs. You host longer council meetings. You start writing things down. You begin grooming your son, Maga, to succeed you. You let him make small decisions, and yes, small mistakes, so that the empire won't fall apart the moment your back aches too much to sit on a throne. But still, sometimes at night you ride out alone into the savannah. You look up at the stars and wonder what stories people will tell about you. Will they remember the man who built Timbuktu into a beacon? Or just the king who made Cairo sparkle and stumble with his gold? You hope for both, because wealth, you've learned, fades, gold rusts, even pyramids crumble. But wisdom? Wisdom echoes, and so you keep building. The final years arrive not with thunder, but with hush. You no longer rise before dawn to review trade routes or balance tribute scrolls. Instead, you sleep in, just a little, listening to the faint scratch of scribes in the next room, the rustle of pages, the clink of tea being poured into tiny silver cups. You're older now. Your beard has silvered like the Niger at moonrise. The strong voice that once silenced squabbling chieftains now speaks slower, softer. But when you speak, they still lean in, because even now, your words hold weight. Your city glows. Timbuktu is no longer just a dot on a trader's map, it is a destination. Students come from across the Sahara wearing dusty sandals and carrying baskets of dates and curiosity. They read under fig trees, they debate under the mosque's towering minaret. Some even begin writing books of their own. And you, Mansa Musa, sit quietly and listen. Every once in a while, a boy will run up to you in the courtyard, grinning, breathless, and ask, "Did you really bring 80 camels full of gold to Mecca?" You chuckle. "No," you say. "It was probably more than that." You still hold court, but less often. Your son, Maga, now wears the lion print robe, the heavy signet ring of rule. He speaks well, perhaps not as cleverly as you did, and he hasn't quite learned the art of knowing when to not speak. But he's learning. You worry, yes, but you also trust. He's seen your rise. He's walked with you on the pilgrimage, eaten with scholars, wept with the poor, bathed in the Red Sea. He carries your stories like folded prayers in his chest. And stories matter now, more than ever. Because time moves differently when you're no longer rushing to conquer or build. You begin to hear the world in its slower songs. The crackle of papyrus, the soft breathing of old friends, the low coo of birds that nest in the arches of your mosque. You find joy in tiny things, a goat learning to climb stairs, the accidental poetry of a grammar student's essay, even the breeze. It carries dust, yes, but also memory. The griots have already started composing your legacy. Some say you were richer than any king before or after. Some call you the one who made Islam and West Africa shake hands. Others whisper that you were a sorcerer, conjuring gold from sand. You allow the legends. But in private, you tell one griot, "Make sure they remember the books. The books are more important than the gold." And he nods, and he writes that down. You live long enough to see your grandson born. The child sleeps in a cradle beside your bed some nights, fingers curled like tiny commas. You watch him dream and wonder if he'll ever walk those same desert roads. Will he ask the same questions you did, or will he invent new ones? Eventually, your body begins to slow. The nights stretch longer. Your dreams deepen. Historians still debate the exact year of your death. Some say 1337, others argue for earlier or even later. The records, like all records, are hazy. Some details smudge, some names vanish, but the echoes remain. What remains is a road, worn smooth by camels, scholars, pilgrims, and time. What remains is a city, Timbuktu, where ink became more valuable than ivory, and ideas crossed borders faster than gold. What remains is a whisper, a name, yours, the wealthiest man who ever lived, and perhaps the wisest. You fade quietly, not in a palace, but in a room filled with books. There is no war, no sudden fall, just the slow hush of a life fully lived. And as you slip into sleep, you smile, because the desert will remember your footprints, and the stars, those old companions, are still shining. Now your eyes feel heavier, like sand settling in the corners of an old scroll. The sounds of distant caravans, of quills scratching parchment, begin to melt into quiet. Whatever road you're walking, whether it's the golden trail of history or just a soft stretch toward sleep, know that you're not alone. The stars above Mali still shine, and wisdom still echoes in the wind. Let your breath slow, let your shoulders ease, and drift gently, like a boat down the Niger River, toward the dreams that wait beyond. You've arrived. End of script. Sweet dreams. Thank you for being here. If this brought you peace, consider subscribing. Until next time, be kind to yourself.